Welcome to today's episode, where we delve into the fascinating story of a man who had a near-death experience. This story is not just about his brush with death, but also his life-altering encounter with love. From feeling a deep sense of peace and unity, to experiencing a connection beyond this physical world. Now, let's dive into the heartwarming and eye-opening tale of love and near-death. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:35, I was let go from my temporary arrest job in Memphis. In March 1976, I just put a down payment on a used Monte Carlo car while sharing a duplex with a roommate. I believed my future was bright as a tax examiner. I was earning well before the furlough arrived. The same night I received that, I left for Arkansas, and as I stood at a roadside stand, there was an earthquake. My entire world was about to change drastically. My feet and shoulders felt strangely cold. When I woke up the following morning, my toes appeared to have rubber bands wrapped around them because they were pale and tingly. Additionally, I was unable to lift my arms above my shoulders, like I was lifting bricks. A brand new nightmare, unlike anything I had ever seen or imagined, was weaving itself into the day. By the end of the day, my thighs and knees were so weak that I could barely stand up. Since my mother was out of town, I went to stay with a friend of hers because it was unsafe for me to remain at home alone. I had lost touch with my entire body. I had been in very good health up until that morning. I was 20 years old, and riding my bicycle across town had given me strong arms, legs, and a healthy heart. The following evening, I tried to get out of bed to use the restroom, but instead fell to the floor and was unable to get up. The woman I was staying with was unable to lift or assist me to get me off the ground. We had to call my brother. By that time, I was a scared little boy. Due to the furlough from my job at the ERS, I had neither insurance nor a source of income. My mother had borrowed a wheelchair for me on the third day because I was unable to walk or stand. When my brother arrived, he helped me get out of the car and into the neurologist's office. The doctor examined me while wearing a shocked expression on his face. He quickly and silently left the room before coming back to give us the prognosis. He claimed that Guillain-Barré syndrome was the underlying cause of the paralysis, GBS. We waited, convinced that he had overlooked a straightforward cure or treatment that would, we hoped, solve the problem in a few days. I was in intensive care 2 days later, and on the verge of becoming completely paralyzed from the top down. My body would not budge, but my mind was alert. I quickly became wary of the endless days spent under the ICU's constant lights and the restriction on visitors. I started to feel restless and worried about what might happen. One day I was given a drink of water by a nurse and I choked. I couldn't breathe again after that. I struggled to take a breath as I believed I was the closest to death I had ever been. I might have passed away at that point if a mechanical respirator hadn't been able to breathe for me. I was soon fitted with a long-term respirator which hissed and whooshed as it pumped each breath from me. Since I still had limited control over my lung muscles, it was initially difficult to let it breathe for me. As my lungs battled with the machine to find the right breathing rhythm, the machine would beep and beep repeatedly. Wondering whether the machine would keep running or what would happen if it stopped was extremely terrifying. If I had to rely on a respirator, I assumed it meant I would die. Nobody would provide any information regarding my potential recovery time or my ability to leave the hospital. Simply put, there was no timeline for this illness. There were, and still are, incredibly few severe cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome that have been documented. Other than maintaining mechanical life support, while waiting to see if the body recovered on its own, there were no known treatments or cures. I was unable to speak because I was using a respirator and had a tube in my throat. My nurses devised ways for me to communicate with them by clicking my tongue, blinking my eyelids, or answering their questions. Most days, I was fully aware of everything around me. The doctor suggested that I'd be permitted to use a battery-operated radio and TV, which were extremely uncommon in 1976. But a TV was discovered and placed at the foot of my bed. The basketball team from Memphis State University was in the final round of the March Madness tournament and had a good chance to win. When the final game was on TV, the medical staff stopped by to gather around my bed and cheered. It was the high point of my stay in the ICU, and knowing that we had a successful team that year lifted my spirits. ICU was where I spent my 20th birthday as well. My sister-in-law wanted to toast a birthday muffin with a candle, with all the oxygen around us in the ICU. The match was down on the matchbook and ready to strike when an alert nurse yelled, "Stop." Without the candles, we still had a celebration, all the more reason to smile that day. On 2 occasions, the medical professionals warned me that I was very close to passing away. Even though I couldn't move my muscles, I was taking a lot of pain medication because I couldn't explain the intense nerve and muscle pain I was experiencing. No medicine could repair my neurological system's damage. In spite of regular chest pounding from respiratory therapists, I developed several cases of pneumonia. For the majority of the paralysis-related symptoms, there were no great magic cures or medications. The next thing that happened was that I very clearly saw an angel of death hovering over my bed. It was a faceless figure and was dressed in a brown hooded robe like a monk. I was so frightened that I thought my spirit had jumped out of my body. My body and all the tubes were below me when I all of a sudden found myself floating above my bed, looking down at my lifeless body. Then, I recall being in a pitch-black space with a light shining down from above and only being able to make out Jesus's white robe, knees, legs, and feet. I always think of the woman in the Bible who used her hair and tears to wipe Jesus's feet. I was there. I experienced the greatness of unwavering love, which swept over me like a tidal wave. I experienced an unparalleled sense of tranquility before or since the experience. I have never felt that much love or peace within my spirit. Jesus gave me the option to stay with him or to go back to my immobile body and carry out my purpose for God. Up until that point, I didn't feel like I had done much for him. My first experience with God came while I was a preemie and spent the first 10 days of my life in the hospital being cared for by nuns and Franciscan monks. From day one, they protected me. I believe that over the years, many angels have comforted and inspired me. When I returned to myself, it was June 1976. All the information the ICU nurses had about what transpired there was that I came close to passing away a few times. A faith healer from the Dido Sea Church and my minister at the time then came to pray over me. After going 3 months without feeling anything in my torso, I would feel all warm and tingly when they held their hands over me. A few weeks later, I started to move, so I moved on to a rehab center. My legs started moving after 3 months, at which point I was discharged from the intensive care unit and placed in rehabilitation. When doctors and nurses didn't think I was still in excruciating pain, when other patients like stroke patients had no feeling. It was one of the most agonizing aspects of rehab in my wheelchair, learning how to maneuver. I spent the majority of the 3 months of therapy. Every part of my body was hypersensitive to any touch, and any movement of the body had to be learned all over again. After a while, I figured out how to write with my right hand again, stand up, and eventually walk again, despite having non-functioning toes and ankle muscles that gave way when I tried to turn. I also eventually learned how to talk without the respirator. My ankles, feet, and toes hurt a lot, and had muscles that were permanently weakened, despite the fact that they appeared normal. Although I was extremely grateful to be able to get out of the wheelchair and walk again after rehabilitation therapy, other parts of my lower half of my body were affected. Additional muscle control and nerve conduction loss occurred in small quantities, enough to last the rest of my life. People today still look at me in disbelief when I explain my partial disability, as if I'm making up my damaged body and my need for flexibility at work and social gatherings. I've learned to walk more slowly and to make accommodations so that I can try to appear normal when I walk. Whether we are young or old, this is where we all struggle with the emotional pain and sense of loneliness that frequently accompany physical loss. Now, if you're ready for more heart-wrenching and thought-provoking stories, we invite you to check out our this video next.